Have you ever updated a configuration file and then wondered later, what did I change exactly? Or maybe you have two versions of a script and you need to know, did I break something or did I improve it? Let's talk about it. A common task for Linux system administrators is backing up and changing files. Today, I'm going to show you two ways in Linux to compare files, using diff and sdiff. We'll also briefly look at some best practices in Linux concerning making backup copies of configuration files, as well as creating changelog files to track those changes. And by the end of this video, you'll be able to see and understand and even merge files like a pro in Linux. Let's jump in. Before we start modifying configuration files and using tools like diff and sdiff, I want to pause for a moment and talk about the best practices. You see, in Linux, especially in production systems, you never modify important files blindly. There are two habits every Linux system administrator should develop. First, always create a backup before making changes. And second, keep a simple changelog of what you changed and why. As the Unix philosophy emphasizes simplicity and clarity, your changes should be traceable and reversible. There's a saying in system administration, hope is not a backup strategy. Well, there's actually several, but let me give you another important idea to remember. If you didn't document it, you didn't really fix it. Configuration mistakes, you see, they just don't break programs. They can take down entire systems. Let's go ahead and type locate space ssh d config and hit enter. The sshd config file configures the ssh daemon, the server. Now, it's read by the sshd service, and changes to this config file affect how the machine accepts SSH connections, which means we need to be careful. Now, in a real system, you might be modifying a file like the etc ssh sshd config. But for our demo, we're going to work on a copy so that we don't accidentally break our SSH service. Let's do this by first typing mkdir, and then the directory will be sshd _config _work. Hit enter. Next, let's type ls-f. We can see our directory exists. And then finally, let's copy from the etc ssh directory, the config file, to our local sshd work file. Now I'm going to let you know that before I hit enter, that this is going to fail. The reason is, as you can see, is permission denied. We're copying from a protected directory. So we need elevated permissions. We'll type sudo cp etc ssh sshd. Now we'll use our config work directory and hit enter. We'll type our password. Type ls-la on our sshd work directory, and I want you to notice what exists. We see the file, but we also see something peculiar. And this should be expected. The file is still owned by root. So we need to change the ownership, and we can do that with the chown command. Let's cd into our directory. We'll type chown, and then the user and the group, Michael, sshd config, and hit enter. Again, it tells us it's not permitted because this is owned by root. So we'll type sudo with elevated permissions, chown, Michael, sshd. Now, if we do an ls-la again on the directory, we can see that the file is fully owned by me. Okay, let's go ahead and create a backup of our file. This is the backup that we would typically do when we're getting ready to make changes. We'll type cp for copy, sshd, config, and we'll type that again. But at the end, we'll put a .bak and hit enter. We type ls-f, we can see that the file exists. Now, using the .back or the _back is a common manner to mark a file as a backup. Creating a backup of the original is important because this gives a manner to fall back upon in case there is a system breakage. Not having one, well, it's not wise. Another way you might create a backup is to add a timestamp to the file. And we can do this like this. We'll say cp sshd config dot $ parenthesis date plus %f close parenthesis and hit enter. Now, if we type ls-la, we can see that not only is our backup file there, but we also have a backup file with a timestamp. Now, once those changes are done inside of our backup file, the next step would be to create a change log. Let's clear the screen and we'll type echo 2026-02-13. Here's where you'd put a particular user. I'm going to say user XYZ. And let's say that we've changed something in the config file, like enabled password authentication for testing. So we're going to echo this statement to a new file called CHANGELOG and hit enter. If we ls-la on our directory now, we can see our changelog, we can see the files that we made updates to, and we can also see the permissions. And if we needed to look inside of our changelog, we could simply type vi changelog and see the changes that were there. Or we could type less changelog as well. I see the changes that are there. Or you could type cat changelog. By creating the backup and changelog files, we can now know what was changed, when it changed, and why it changed. And you can revert instantly. So now that we've technically have two versions of a file, how do we see what's changed? Well, that's where diff comes in. Although we just created two copies of the sshd config file, I'm going to create two other files for simplicity of the tutorial in this next part and store them in the work directory that we just created. We'll type ls-f and pwd to validate where we're at. Here we'll type echo server equals production port equals 8080 and timeout equals 30. Send this to a file called config_v1.txt. We'll create a second file Using the same ability, we'll type echo server equals production, port equals 9090, timeout equals 45, and logging equals true. We'll send this to a new file called config_v2.txt. Now, we have two slightly different configuration files. The question is, what has changed? In your terminal, we'll type ls, and then we'll type diff config v1 space config v2 and hit enter. Let's go ahead and decode this. The less than symbol means this line exists in the first file. The greater than symbol means this line exists in the second file. And a C means changed. This output is powerful, but not always beginner friendly. So the sequence 2, 3, C2, 4 represent where the file changed. This means that lines 2 through 3 in the first file were changed to lines 2 through 4 in the second file. There are only 3 possible operation letters in classic diff output. Letter C means changed, letter A means add, and D means delete. Let's take a look at the unified format using the -u flag. We'll type diff -u config v1 text space config v2 text and hit enter. This is the format used in Git patches and pull requests. Now, a few key things to remember here. The minus symbol means removed, and the plus symbol means added. And context lines, they just stay unmarked. So if you want more surrounding context, then you could add an additional flag with the -U and a number to specify the number of lines to be displayed. Let's go ahead and move on to a side-by-side using the diff flag Y. Let's clear the screen. We'll type diff-y config v1 space config v2 and hit enter. Now, the symbols mean this. If there's a pipe, it means it's modified. If there is a less than symbol, it's only on the left file. If there's a greater than symbol, then it's only on the right file. This format is very visual. It's very quick for inspection. We can also control the width to bring this a little bit closer together for comparison. We can do this by typing diff-y -width, and here I'm going to just say 100. Again, we'll use the config v1 text and config v2 text and hit enter. As you can see, it pulls it together just ever so slightly. So we've looked at using the diff command, and it presents some very useful properties for comparing files to see the differences. Let's now turn to the sdiff command, which you might be wondering, what's the difference here? The primary difference is this. Diff reports differences. Sdiff is designed for side-by-side comparison and interactive merging. Keep in mind that diff has a default output, which is change-based, edit script style. You can produce a unified format with the -u, and it's ideal for patches and version control. Sdiff, which we'll be looking at shortly, is built for manual review, human decision-making, and interactive merging. It's operator-friendly. The big functional difference is that sdiff supports file merges. Go ahead and type sdiff config v1 text, config v2 text, and hit enter. Notice how it's very similar to using diff with the -y flag. But this is where the similarities end and where sdiff becomes quite powerful. Now, I want you to check this out. Type this with me, sdiff -o merged text. This is the file we want to be created from the merger of config v1 text and config v2 text. At first glance, it seems like there's nothing to it. But notice that we're at a % symbol, and if we hit enter again, we'll be presented with the options. Now, the core options include this: L to choose left, R to choose right, E to edit manually, B to include both, and Q to quit. However, we're presented with quite a few more options here. This is known as the GNU sdiff options, and they're much more verbose. Let's go ahead and step through each of these one at a time. We'll go ahead and type ed and hit enter. And what this basically does is it presents us inside of a VI terminal where we would have to choose I to be in insert mode and then do the type of editing we want. The ed command says edit, use both versions, but then decorate them with a header. You can see here that the header is listed as either the +++ or the ---. Go ahead and hit escape, and then we'll type :Q to quit. We'll run the command again, sdiff-o merger text, and we'll hit enter again, and now we're presented with the options. Let's go ahead and do EB, and here with EB, we're presented with both versions again, but this time without a header. Go ahead and type :Q to quit. We'll run the command again, we'll hit enter, and we can use EL, which is edit, and then use the left version. So we'll type EL, hit enter, and again, we're in an interactive mode, an edit mode. We could hit I on the keyboard, make some changes, hit the escape key, and move on. Let's go ahead and type : and then Q to quit. We'll run the command again. We could use ER, which is using the right. Same process again, : Q to quit. Or we could just say discard both and edit a new one. And if we hit enter, well, looks like I was not at the % symbol. Let's rerun the command. Hit enter. If we run E, it will discard both versions and then edit a new one. And now we're in a blank file for editing. We'll go ahead and type Q to quit. We're going to type ls to see if we created a merge file there. We did. Go ahead and type rm merge to remove it. Let's clear the screen. Rerun our sdiff-o merged again. Hit enter. And then we have, of course, use the left version. If we type L, use the right version. What this will do is it'll create that merge file based on whichever version. Now we're getting down to a couple of the other ones, which include S for silently include common lines. Let's go ahead and type S and hit enter. We're back at the % again. Let's hit enter. Looks like we need to type Q to quit. Type ls. We have a merged file that exists. Let's type less merged. And we can see that it only took the common line and put it in the merged file. Let's type Q to quit. I'm going to remove that merged text again. Clear the file. Run the command again. This time we can use verbose to include common files. And as you can see, we're still here at the %. And let's go ahead and type Q to quit. And we'll type less merged and see what we have. Looks like we still have the same thing that silent does in this case. Okay, as you can tell, this allows you to manually merge files. And this is extremely useful for config files, for scripts, for system upgrades, and manual patching. sdiff is pretty cool, right? It's important that you become familiar with both diff and sdiff, but when working on servers and managing configuration files, sdiff just makes sense to have a good grasp of what it does. Okay, next, let's do some rapid-fire demos of the diff command again before we close the video. So using diff, if you want to ignore white space, you would type diff-w. We use the same file again, and config v2 text. If you want to ignore blank lines, you would type diff-b, config v1 text, config v2 text. And if you want to ignore a case, you would type diff-i, again, this file that you want to compare, and hit enter. Another cool feature, though, of diff is that we can also use it to diff a directory. So let's go ahead and create a quick copy of the sshd config work directory. Right now, I'm inside of the sshd config work directory, so let's go down one level. Clear the screen. We're going to type cp-a for archive copy, sshd config work, and then we'll type sshd config work again, but we'll use a number 2 and hit enter. If we type ls-la, we can see the 2 directories now that exist. Let's go ahead and clear the screen. We'll type diff-r for recursive sshd config work and sshd config work 2 and hit enter. Nothing shows because, well, they're both the same. So let's add a file to the second one. We'll type touch sshd config work / mynews.txt and hit enter. Now, if we run the same command again to compare the directories, we'll see that it says that only in the sshd config work directory is the text, my news. This is important. This reveals the one difference in the files. This last command is especially powerful and incredibly useful for backup verification, deployment checks, and source code comparisons. At this point, you still might be wondering when should we use diff or when should we use sdiff. So use diff when you want patch style output or you're generating differences for version control. Use sdiff when you want side-by-side comparison or when you want interactive merging. Most modern tools like Git and GitHub are powered by diff under the hood. This isn't just a Linux command. This is a foundational developer tooling that you're learning about. So the next time you modify a config file, before you guess what has changed, run diff, because in Linux, precision matters. Listen, if you made it this far in the video, leave me a comment. Tell me your favorite tool. Is it diff or sdiff, and why? I would really like to hear what you think. If this video has helped you, please like and subscribe. It helps me out. I'll see you in the next video. Blessings.